Hello and welcome back to another special edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today on Monday, January 4th. It's also a great pleasure to be joined today by our two state senators from Bennington County. Richard Sears and Brian Campion are with us here to talk a little bit about what they're expecting to see when the legislature reconvenes on Wednesday, January 6th. I guess, Senator Sears, I'll let you get us started here.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest issue or issues that the legislature will be confronting as we start a new session?
Well, I think number one will be is the COVID pandemic and how we work our way through this this winter surge that we've found ourselves in Bennington County being in one of the hotspots in terms of COVID increase. But how the state works its way through it, making sure that the vaccine is readily available to those who want it, making sure that our economy, as we do the best we can for particularly businesses that are struggling through this period, as well as for schools and families that are struggling with food insecurity. You know, we've got so many problems in this state that have been created by COVID. We've been lucky that we've been one of the best in the nation at the rates, but we still have suffered greatly. And, you know, people have died, which is tragic. So I think that's the number one. It won't be the only issue we deal with, but that's the number one issue for all of us as we go back to Montpelier on Wednesday. Well, I say Montpelier. I'll be back there on Wednesday for the day to just get sworn in, and but we will be meeting remotely at least until March.
And Senator Campion, your thoughts as the session is about to get started?
Yeah, no, I think Senator Sears covered it quite well. First, foremost, you know, the health and safety of our constituents, looking at schools, looking at the vaccine rollout, making certain, as Senator Sears mentioned, that people continue to take the necessary precautions that Vermonters have been so good at taking. We are seeing an outbreak now. People are concerned and eyes are on Bennington County. And I know the two of us would just want to encourage people to continue the wearing of masks and washing hands and social distancing and taking all the necessary precautions so that in a couple of weeks we don't see more cases, but more of a leveling off and decrease. I think the only other thing, you know, might add is Senator Ballant, our new pro tem, has asked all of the committees, as Senator Sears mentioned, to first and foremost to consider issues that might come to their committee related to COVID. So Senator Sears can certainly talk about things that might come to judiciary. I think a lot of COVID-related things will likely end up in, of course, the Health and Welfare Committee's committee, appropriations, education, I think, with regard to schools, and certainly economic development. And Senator Sears is on appropriations. I serve on finance in the afternoon. And, you know, we've already started to take a little look, go through with our colleagues, the monies that are coming from the federal government and how they might be divided up. And that will land in the Appropriations Committee. And we can talk more about some of, you know, what's coming from the feds and some of those restrictions and see where, you know, Vermonters might see additional funds.
Well, I was wondering, the first round of CARES Act funding that the federal government passed last spring. One of the concerns I seem to recall hearing frequently was that there were a lot of strings attached to the money, or a lot of restrictions placed around how the money could be used, not enough flexibility, basically. Is it your sense that the subsequent round of funding that the government finally got around to passing just last week, I guess. Does that come with a little more flexibility on how the state may deploy some of those funds, or
I think
are the
it's
guidelines pretty
too
strict?
soon, it's too soon to know for sure. But one of the positive things is that we now have until next December to spend money that we got that hadn't been spent by December 31st. So that part of that 1.25 billion that Vermont received we'll continue to be able to spend it on things like healthcare and schools. We had rollbacks that they were considering of about 14 million in healthcare and I think around 20 million in education because they weren't able to get it out the door in time by December 31st. That's been extended, so those will help to some extent with some of our current problems. There were strings attached, but we hired a firm. The legislature hired a firm, and they are expert in determining how you can use the money. And so we were extremely careful in doing that. But one of the things that I certainly fought hard for as a member of the Joint Fiscal Committee, we were given the job of approving administrative expenditures from the COVID funds once the legislature adjourned. And so we were meeting, I think we met sometime at least once a week and sometimes twice a week during the off period from October until just recently. We're actually meeting tomorrow morning to approve money for the towns to mail out ballots. But one of the things we were able to do was to target some money to the hospitality industry. But part of the problem in trying to target money has been some of those regulations. And I'm hopeful that as we go through the 5,000 page bill that Congress just passed, we'll find some more flexibility. But as you noted, there were a lot of strings attached, and it was hard to target to the most hard hit in the hospitality industry without targeting the entire hospitality industry. So there may have been businesses that were doing fine that didn't need it as much as some other business that was really hurt by it. Where, I mean, I know the lines at fast food restaurants and so forth were long at times because they were already into the takeout business, but many of the other restaurants had to re-engineer things to be able to do takeout. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to target better to the businesses that really need it.
I can add that, we do know a few things that are in there, that there is money for vaccination. I'm looking at a brief right here. Tracing, testing, data collection, those sorts of things are in the bill. Monies for mental health, college students, childcare. There is additional money for, PPPs, the Paycheck Protection Program. So there, those are some of the things, but again, it'll go through a process. Senator Sears' committee will take a look. Other committees will weigh in, and the governor will also will be our starting point as usual. He'll put forward a budget, I would say after, we've been back for a few weeks with his recommendations.
I think we're all hopeful that the next president, when he's sworn in on the 20th, that President Biden will and Congress will come together with another stimulus package. The states and municipalities have been hurt hard by this COVID, and they're not taken care of in what just passed. So towns are going to be faced with laying off first responders at a time when they need them badly. And schools will be faced with some shortages as in the state. So we're hopeful that help will be coming as well.
One of the biggest.
I'll just add, it's great that we have Senator Leahy, on the Appropriations Committee. He was incredibly helpful, instrumental in getting that first round of funding to us. And I'm sure will continue to play an important role going forward.
is it your sense or feeling that the vaccine rollout will go at least as smoothly as possible?
Yeah, I think as long as they
Handle?
get the vaccine from the feds, I think, there's a good plan. But that's I think part of the problem. Part of what we heard this morning was, making certain that it's accessible. They seem to me, and I think Dick would agree, that there's a solid plan put forward around getting the elderly and certainly people with pre-existing conditions vaccinated after frontline workers, but that's all contingent upon the vaccine arriving here.
I don't think it's going as fast as we would hope, and I think that's it was sad news today, actually, when we met with the Secretary of Health, the Secretary of Human Services and the Commissioner of Health, Dr. Levine, the delegation met today, and I didn't hear, they were talking about February 1st, before they get the first round or phase 1 of the vaccine to first responders and so forth. And then the next group coming, and they were also frustrated by the slowness of the rollout from the feds. I have a constituent from Winhall used the term, instead of Operation Warp Speed, we're on Operation Snail's Pace. And I think in some ways it's apt. When he wrote that to me, I started to think, oh, wow, just complaining. But no, you think about it, and the seriousness of this and the way it's rolled out. And then you had situations like at the University of Vermont Medical Center where people were who were not frontline workers, who were behind the scenes working at home remotely like we are, getting vaccinated because they worked at the hospital. And it just isn't right with the limited number of vaccines that we have. So I think we need to do a much better job. I think one of the things that I'm going to do, and I think all of us will be doing, is kind of keep the feet to the fire to make sure the rollout is as smooth and as quick as possible.
And maybe this is just worth taking a moment and clarifying. I'm not sure if, at least from what I heard, these tend to be federal issues. I don't think our state is we're not putting blame there. They do have a plan and they have been vaccinating people, but it's about accessibility of the vaccine, getting it, for the state officials to get it itself.
Yeah, to make, other than the University of Vermont Hospital, where the media has discovered that many of the backroom, I would call them, not frontline workers, have been getting the vaccine rather than, so there has been that the state is investigating right now.
I was just wondering what you thought maybe some of the other issues that might come up.
I think there will be some room, at least for the committees I serve on, natural resource and energy and finance, to do some other work. But it is different when you're remote. And I don't see a big Act 250 bill coming out while we are working remotely. I don't see, this was attempted last year by the House. There are some there are some things that work okay with Zoom, but there are some things that are complicated, make things complicated. All those meetings that you can have in the cafeteria or in your committee room aren't happening. And I think it will slow some work down. And like I said, I think once, similar to what we did, when COVID first hit, once committees have assessed and addressed things related to what they are working on related to COVID, I think there'll be some flexibility, but I think it's going to be, highly, COVID focused. One thing that I know finance we are going to work on is continuing our work on broadband. And it's possible that some of these additional federal dollars, and it could be, might be helpful, as well as a Biden administration that might be committed to building this kind of infrastructure. If those kinds of opportunities present themselves, I think Vermont is in a pretty good position to take advantage and continue the work it's done with build out. I think in terms of natural resources and energy, honestly, I don't see a big Act 250 bill coming out. I think after we work with the Agency of Natural Resources and see if there's anything that can be done related to our jurisdiction and COVID, we will work on things related, I think, to weatherization. They're also, again, looking at some of the federal dollars that might become available and try to work with our partners and increase weatherization. And then back to finance, we're going to be, as you know, people are projecting a large increase in terms of property taxes. And, I do think there might be dollars in these new federal monies that can go toward making certain that increase doesn't happen this year. But I think that'll be all hands on deck, and I'm optimistic that it won't be as projected.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. But it's sometimes things that may not be directly COVID related, like broadband. We find out during this pandemic that what we already knew, but how disadvantaged many of our constituents are by not having good access to broadband, or using for school remote learning, or for meetings or whatever. So it's certainly connected. And one of those things for the Judiciary Committee that we'll be looking at is the trials, and the fact that we have a number of defendants, and you are presumed innocent until proven guilty, but a number of defendants waiting trials that haven't happened since last March. So we need to figure out how we're going to deal with that backlog of cases that people are sitting in jail waiting for a trial date. So that's related to COVID, but it's, we're looking at trials. Before the session, I'm trying to figure out exactly when the session ended, because it feels like yesterday. But I did have a conversation with the governor regarding two bills that he allowed to become law without his signature. And I did make agreements to work on those two bills when we came back, if I was reelected. And he was reelected, that we would work on those two bills. One was the marijuana bill. And he had a number of concerns about the marijuana rollout of the bill. And I said that we would address his concerns, as well as those of many in the community, the racial disparities that have been seen over the years in marijuana and its enforcement, as well as the smaller growers. So we have prepared a bill that we're introducing, a number of us, that deals with many of the problems the governor identified and other problems other groups have identified with the bill S-54 that passed last year. And the second was the use of force by the law enforcement. And I did agree with them that we would take another look at that. So we will be looking at both of those bills, as well as some of the other justice reinvestment related bills as we move forward in Senate Judiciary over the next biennium. But those two would certainly be priorities, since we did make an agreement with the governor to look at them. And he sent rather lengthy non-signing messages. Usually he sends a veto message or no message. When he just lets something become law, he rarely sends a message. But he had very lengthy messages on both of those.
Just turning to the education side of things, I was wondering what you both thought might be going on with the state college situation. As you both remember, not quite a year ago, then Chancellor Jeb Spalding made a very controversial recommendation that there might be some restructuring needed around the number of campuses in the state college system.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to at least start this year. You probably have seen that there is a report out that was done this summer by a study committee looking at different different options for the state colleges. Certainly, the landscape of higher education is changing dramatically. And are there ways for us to, rethink, reuse, reimagine some of these institutions so that we can keep a higher education institutions in a degree accessible and affordable to Vermonters. A lot has changed when Governor Cuomo and other states have started to lower their tuition costs for community colleges. Students are, we used to draw a lot of students over the years from the Albany area. I think Castleton and other institutions have seen a decrease in that regard. And the cost of higher ed in general. Young people around the country are making decisions because they just can't afford it. So, I think I could see us starting this process. I don't think it's a one-year process. I do think it'll end up in the Education Committee, but also I think it'll end up in the Appropriations Committee. I know this most recent bill coming from the feds has about 40 million or 30 million in it for higher education. But like you said, the cost of addressing this is going to be pretty significant if it's business as usual. So is there a way to rethink higher ed? And I think we also have to, ask ourselves, what are we offering? And really take a step back and see what's needed in this state as it relates to higher ed, but also technical programs and other sort of post-secondary programs.
I think whatever we do this year will be very short-term and more of a bailout. I don't think we'll address the problem. And the problem is one of the long-term, both public and private colleges in Vermont need our support. And many of the problems that we look at, how does that impact the community? Look at Southern Vermont College's closure in Bennington and how it impacted the Bennington community. Obviously, it's different when it's a state college and somewhat state funded, but I think we have to really take a realistic look. Can that part of the state support two state colleges? I think Castleton is going to be fine. I think that the community college of Vermont is going to be fine. But I think trying to support Linden and Johnson, two separate campuses, one university, is difficult. And I realize that many of the folks who represent that area are going to fight hard, but I just don't see them both surviving realistically. I think and this COVID situation, where so much is being done remotely, has obviously impacted dramatically those two institutions. So, but I think the technical college is going to have to go through some changes as well. But I think they survive. I just don't know how you keep both Linden and Johnson surviving in the long term.
And if it were done in a way, as Dick's talking about, similar to SVC, I mean, we're lucky here. There are other things supporting our community with regard to jobs and cultural activities and access to higher ed, whether it's Bennington College or the Community College of Vermont. But taking one of those institutions out of a town like Johnson or Linden, similar to what's happened with Green Mountain College, it could be devastating. So how do we do it, and how do we do it in a thoughtful?
But being realistic.
Yeah, I agree. It's just
short term.
How can we do it in a way that, and is there any possibility? Is there any way, because they both offer sort of different strengths, is there a way of looking at them as one institution? And I don't know the answer, but it's tough.
I wanted to ask you both what your thoughts were on some of the new leadership you'll be seeing in the legislature. You have a new Senate pro tem, Senator Ballant from neighboring Windham County. We have a new House Speaker replacing Missy Johnson. Joe Kowinski will be stepping up. Do you anticipate a good working relationship, for lack of a better term, between the House and the Senate leadership?
Well, we might, I don't know if we'll see eye to eye on this or not, but I think it's going to be good. I do. I think the two of them seem to have a solid relationship. And I think they're both committed to making certain that the relationship between the two bodies is strong. And I'm excited to have a pro tem from Southern Vermont. And with her eye towards Southern Vermont, how can you not, when she represents our neighboring county? And we've partnered with Senator Ballant on a number of different things in the past. And so, so I'm excited. I think it's a good match. And so I'm curious to hear what my colleague thinks.
I'll agree with Brian for now. But I will say, I've been there, and things do not always run smoothly between the Senate and the House. We have
I completely agree
different
there.
positions, and I think that it'll be difficult. I'm thrilled that Becca Ballant's going to be pro tem. I'm really supportive of her. I think she's going to do a great job. I'm going to miss Tim Ash. I thought he did a fantastic job as pro tem for 6 years. I'm also going to miss Mitzi Johnson. I think a lot of people didn't realize how much she brought to the table. She was a moderating influence in a House that had very different viewpoints. I never served in the House. Brian did, and he may be more familiar with it. But it's always difficult when you have the left, the right in your own party, as well as centrist factions. And she did a masterful job of keeping them together and getting bills passed. And I, for one, am going to miss that. I don't know if Jill will be able to do the same. That's one of the difficulties of leading in the House. There's so many members, and I remember when Ralph Wright was Speaker when I was first in office, and he had that ability. I don't know that Jill will, and that she's going to have to grow into that. And I think that's what the problem's there is.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know Jill as well. She has served as the majority leader, but certainly the majority leader is very different than Speaker of the House, similar to majority leader in the Senate to President pro tem. So we'll see how she does, but I'm optimistic.
All right.
Well, I'm too. I'm not going to. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that that's.
Oh no, I'm not. I absolutely.
Brian is trying to be
He's trying to be diplomatic.
Yeah, he was. He was being diplomatic.
Yes, Happy New Year.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you both for making the time for the conversation. Really appreciate it. And we'll definitely be in touch, and maybe even do another conversation like this, perhaps around town
no,
meeting.
it's pretty easy to update.
We've got started. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both again for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Good luck.
I know.
Okay.
All
Bye-bye.
right.